Welcome back to Siahi, Writers for Writing. We are continuing our conversation with Jerry Pinto.
I'm
Jerry,
so sorry to be so long and laborious, but let's go.
thank you, Jerry. Continuing our conversation. So, coming to your writing, especially, you write in different forms. I feel like I read your interview somewhere where you said the self-aware person has so many like conflicting thoughts in their head, and I feel like you've done justice to many of them because you've written in different forms and genres, journalistic, editing, translation. But books like M and the Big Whom, A Book of Light, and even your recent translation of Swadesh Deepak's I Have Not Seen Mandu deal with the topic of mental health, but not through the lens of self pity or, oh, I'm so tragic, look at what's happened, but through lightness and humor. Tell us a little bit about changing the narrative there.
I think the important thing is that M in the Big Home, when I wrote about it, I did not anticipate that it was a book about mental health.
Of
You know,
course.
Obviously, in some ways, it is because the central protagonist has a mental health issue that determines the course of the lives of everyone around her. But it could so well have been ALS that
Yeah.
does that,
Yeah.
or cerebral palsy, or any neuromotor dysfunction in one member of the family rewrites the destiny of the entire family that
Right.
must now reconfigure its living and working to adjust to that. But having said that, I just thought it was a book. I was writing a book about people trying to love
Yeah.
each other in a difficult situation, in a small flat where there's no place, room to maneuver. You could not in a one bedroom hall kitchen as a 14-year-old walk into your bedroom and slam the door because there was one bedroom and everybody was in that bedroom. So there was no slamming of doors. Okay. So that's what I was writing about, and I found that it was catalyzing mental health conversations, and that was good. And that was a lesson in postmodernism also,
Yeah.
in the sense that you can write a text but you cannot control the reception of the text.
Right.
That you have to just let go and watch as it flowers. Once you have taken that position that okay, go surprise me,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you're fine, right? And this is what I'd say to parents as well. Like, you have a kid, you may have a plan for them. You may be a doctor and you want them to be a doctor. Or you may not have become a doctor and you want them to become a doctor. But if you were just to take the attitude that, like, hey, you're a kid, you're a human being, go surprise me, okay?
Right.
You'd probably everyone would be happier, right? Go surprise me, that's the answer. Okay. So now that this book went out and surprised me, readings tended to turn into certain, sessions of catharsis where people would talk about things that had happened in their families, suicide attempts that sometimes were not attempts, but the person died, and a great amount of energy was being released in those sessions. And I began to worry about because I'm not a trained professional,
Sure.
group therapy course runner. I'm just a writer who's written a
Yeah.
book and it's causing this storm. So I talked to a female friend of mine who said, "Why don't you tell them to write? It seems to have helped you."
Yeah.
I didn't know it had helped me,
Yeah.
but apparently I became an easier person to deal with after M in the Big Hoop. So I started telling people, write.
Yes.
And then they would come back and say, one of them said, okay, so I've written, now what? And so I said, okay, if we get more pieces, maybe we can put them together. And the Book of Light started as an idea of we would have 12 pieces or
Yes.
10 pieces where there would be carer accounts
Yes.
and 10 pieces where there would be lived accounts. But with the lived accounts, people began to ring up and say, I've talked to my therapist and I'm being
Yes.
triggered and this
Yes.
isn't. And I'd say, look, first mental health, first self-care, first, your balance is more important than any piece that you're going to write. You come back to it when you can. Don't worry about it. And eventually, of course, because the book has a deadline attached,
Right.
we went with the carers and made it a book about carers. And the Book of Light came out. And the last piece, I'd finished it was a very difficult book to do because what you're doing is someone has just told you the most terrible thing that happened to them. They walked into a room and their daughter was dead
Yeah.
there on the floor. And you're saying, thank you so much for this piece. Now let's rewrite it. Because it can be a much more powerful piece if you will do this. And to give everybody credit, they all went through these drafts and things like that. And I knew how much it was costing them to do this. But still we pushed. I pushed as gently as I could. And A Book of Light came out. The last piece, just when I had, sort of folded everything up and sent it all off, Nirupama Dutt had written a lovely piece, and she's a good friend, a Punjabi poet of some repute. She called up and she said, Jerry, there is a young man who wants to write a piece for the book. And I thought, just like send it off. Let's just send it off. And then I thought back to Bombay Meri Jaan. Naresh Fernandez and I were editing Bombay Meri Jaan, writings about Mumbai. And he said his friend, and then my friend, Paromita Vora, was going to write a piece for us. And a year passed, 2 years passed. And I thought, really now, time to send the book. And I told him, we are packing, we are sending it. And he said, no, just another month, give her another month. 6 months went by. And I got really annoyed because this was kind of blocking me doing something else, moving on to another project. And then he called up and he said, she sent it in. And I said, what? Is it good? He said, it's fantastic. So I said, okay, lovely. Then why is there a but in your voice? So he said, because it's, okay, you just read it and tell me.
Okay.
Yes. Whatever, send it across. He sent it. I downloaded it, opened it. And I thought, 10,000 words? What is this? But I started reading it. It was fabulous.
Wow.
It was it was a stellar piece. So then I finished reading it. I picked up the phone, called Paromita, and I said, Paromita, this is just so magnificent. Take it away from us. Expand it a little. Make it a novella. It'll stand on its own. Right. And this is Oprah Winfrey territory. This is like that kind of book. And she said, oh, that's so kind of you and all, but I think that's as much as I want to write, but you can have it. So we put it in. And Ravi Singh, who was editing the book, said, yeah, it's a little long because it's unbalancing the book, but we should leave it. And so we left it. Normally, we'd have cut it by about 5,000 words, cut it down, but we left a 10,000 word piece in. And I thought about that moment, and I thought about how waiting has always worked. And I said, okay, when can he submit? And I thought, okay, we're going to start this process again because he's going to write it and I'm going to then edit it, and it's going back and forth and back and forth. 1 more 6 months added to the book. But Sukha and Deepak turned out to be an arts writer, a cultural writer. That time, I think he was working for India Today. He sent in a really good piece about his father, Swadesh Deepak.
Right.
And I remember reading the piece and noting the name of this book, Maine Mandu Nahi Dekha. And I thought, I must read this one day. And of course, I was editing and trying to get this out of the way. It needed very little editing. I sent him the piece back within a week, or read back, he was fine. The book was done and sent. And at that time, my friend Jahangir Sabawala died. And I was helping his wife clear his material, all the, for the archive that we were going to set up at the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya. And I was looking through the papers and putting out the books and whatnot. There was Maine Mandu Nahi Dekha.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, why is a Hindi writer's book? I mean, Jahangir Sabawala was very aristocratic. He spoke French perfectly, but he did not speak much Hindi.
Love your accent.
Okay. So I was thinking, what is this book doing here? I picked it up and thought, of course I know what it's doing here. The cover of Maine Mandu Nahi Dekha. Dekha had a Sabawala painting. And Swadesh Deepak had written to Jahangir Sabawala.
Look at these connections.
Yeah, and had asked him for permission. Sabawala had sent him this transparency in those days, very rare things. The book had come out with the transparency on the cover. And that was the connection between these two. So I turned to Shireen and I said, can I borrow this book? And she said, of course, Jerry. And I got into the bus going home. And I'm a Bombay person, so buses and trains become part of your DNA. You know your stop. You don't even need
Have to
like
think.
Yeah, you know when the stop is coming, you get ready and you get off. Because in a train, for instance, you have to get off one stop in advance and make your way to the door. Otherwise, you're not getting out. I started reading this book and I fell into it. By about page 40, I looked up and I had crossed my stop. I was like way down the road. I had to get off and retrace my steps. And I remember coming home, logging on, and at that time I was on Facebook, so was Sukant Deepak. And on Facebook Messenger, I said, I'm reading Maine Mandu Nahi Dekha. It is fabulous. You must translate it. And he wrote back saying, it's too personal. And I wrote back saying, then I'll do it. Then can I do it? And he said, delighted. And I thought, what have you done? You've committed to Hindi. I thought of all the Hindi walas of Delhi standing up and saying, Hindi aati hai kya tumhe? Goan, Roman Catholic from Bombay, where they don't even speak Hindi, they speak some, Raste ka Bombaiya. You will translate it. But the book was just such an outlier in the whole mental health sphere. I'd read so much mental health. I'd never read anything like this. And so I thought I have to somehow find a way to do it. And that's how Maine Mandu Nahi Dekha, it completes what I call my mental health trilogy.
Right, right. No, so I think, when we started reading literature like 20, 25 years, even before that, when we read people like Virginia Woolf, by the way, your cover of M and the Big Homes reminds me maybe of that portrait of Virginia Woolf. But, when we read writers like that, we didn't say that this was a book about mental health. We read those thinking, what a beautiful mind. And I think that's what draws you to many of these books. But now suddenly the discourse has become, oh, this is about mental health. Whereas it is not. It's about different minds and the light in those minds. And I remember you talking about M and the Big Whom and me thinking that this is a book about intense love. And you saying that, it's about love, but it's also about how to love. Right?
Yeah.
So tell us about writing and loving, the intersection of
It's
that.
a lovely question. Thank you for that, Devalina. I think in some ways, all three of the mental health trilogy are really about living and loving, because there is no such thing as the normal mind.
Exactly.
Right? The normal is a construct. And like most constructs, as you try and approach it, it vanishes, it evaporates. Now, this is not to say that there aren't certain things like mental health issues.
Of course.
There are people who have definite suffering
Yes.
and who cannot function in the way that we have constructed our world. And Swadesh Deepak falls into that category in the latter half of his life, when he can't teach, he can't think, he can't write. There's nothing that he can do but lie in bed. When M loses her job at the American consulate, it's like a whole section of her falls off, because she's no longer an economically independent operator. And this is so important. This is something I think we all forget in a certain way, especially literature students, and especially because literature is very averse to talking about money. Okay, so in the education of Yuri, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, what were the things that dominated my life at that point? And one very important thing was economics.
Yes, like he doesn't pay for the omelets when he's eating the chicken omelets. He's like, his friend is paying it and he's unaware
And
of.
he's rich. I'm not.
Yeah.
Now the friend is working on equity. Yuri is working on the notion that there's a larger equity here, that you are obviously someone who lives in a larger, you can afford these masala omelets. And if it were up to me and we are working really, then we should both be eating vada pav outside, because that's my budget. Now you want to
Fair
eat masala
enough.
omelets, that's the sort of thing. Or how he starts working, starts giving tuitions, because that's how he's going to earn a living. That's how he's going to have a sex life. That's how he's going to take people, his girlfriend out on dates. Simple things like that. So he loses his temper over the fact that she won't finish her food. Like she's wasted half of a I don't know, omelette or something that she's ordered. This is the thing. I think we forget that we operate on so many different levels. And all these levels, the political, the poetic, the lyric, the economic, all these constitute who we are.
Absolutely.
And without taking into account all of them, you don't formulate a proper jeevani, a life. Okay?
Right.
And I think if you look at Swadesh Deepak's Mandu Nahi Dekha, I think there is lots about the fact that he's not earning a living.
Yes, yes,
And that
that
he's
he's a
not
professor.
contributing to family
Absolutely.
finances.
Absolutely.
And his wife is, sort of strained by this, and the children are slightly dismissive of their father because he's no longer the breadwinner of the family.
And no longer the father in that sense.
That sense, in the patriarchally constructed sense of the man who will go out and get and bring home, the dead body of the animal, and everyone will eat, whatever. So, I think for me it was important to understand that love does not exist purely on the physical and metaphysical plane, which is where we place it, right? So when you're writing, say, porn, or you're writing romance, or you're writing genre fiction, then it's really about body and silken hair and nice biceps and good thighs or whatever it is, right? That's fine. I'm not dissing it. I'm saying that's where you keep your focus. And when you're writing slightly higher minded literature, then the metaphysical aspect comes in, which is mind and spirit and
Absolutely.
soul, and how all these come together, and then you fall in love or you fall in hate, or you break apart because there's that moment when you come together and then something's happened to disrupt it. What about the economic?
Absolutely. You left a job, I think, to start writing M and the Whom.
Yeah.
And that kind of risk
Yeah.
is as important as the writing itself, that
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
The fact that you said you didn't have doors to slam.
Yeah.
I mean, something that we tell our students, when our students tell us we don't have time, we imagine that they don't have the privacy to read. But here is a writer who then comes from that kind of context, is always reading.
I still don't have a door to slam. I'm still living in the same flat. I mean, but see, I think one of the great advantages of the life of the mind is
Yes.
that there is the privacy of the mind.
Exactly.
Okay, you can retreat into it whenever you want. And with writers, okay, like if you're an engineer and something bad happens in your life, how are you going to put it in a building or in a bridge? But if you're a writer, you've got a poem happening.
Absolutely.
You've got like a character for a story. You've got evidence that this idiotic thing can happen, right? So I remember there was in my grandmother's house, there was a wonderful old lady who lived across the road, and we used to call them the two popes,
Okay.
because they would both stand in their balconies and greet everyone who passed up and down, in the morning and in the evening. So in the morning, everyone who was going to work, turned to my grandmother and then turned to the other old lady and, sort of like receive their blessings and go off to work. In the evening, come back, and both the old ladies would note who came back late and would toddle off to find out why you came back late and stuff. They're kind of gatekeepers of the building. And then the old lady, the other one developed an illness and got herself a really handsome young man to look after her.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Okay. And of course, wild rumors spread across the lane, and everyone was talking about it. And she left him her house when she died. Okay. And he returned the keys to her sons and said, "This is not what I was here for." And he walked away.
Wow.
She's like
I have
so
gooseflesh.
shocked by this because, Bombay's story is a real estate story.
Absolutely.
It is the story of, I think that's why Amrita Mahale or Arvind Adiga, those two books are so important because they talk about real estate issues. Last Man in
Absolutely.
Tower,
Yeah.
Midteeth. They talk about things that matter. And that act of walking away was so
From a
powerful.
house in
yeah.
Bombay.
Yeah. It happens. It happens. And that's what I think okay, so here's the thing. I think if you want to be a writer, you have to actually be a collector of experience.
Absolutely.
That means you must volunteer, right? So if there's anything that's happening on campus, you must volunteer for it because you're going to meet people and each person is a living repository and an archive of experience. Now, I see that most young people spend most of their time on, say, commutes in trains or buses or wherever. They sit down and they immediately plug in their Spotify and they settle down to listening to music, which is fine. I get it. I understand. You have a right to enjoy yourself. If you're a woman, that Spotify thing is probably a way of saying, please don't talk to me. I don't want to be like approached at this point. Got it. But I'm saying the loss is tremendous because I have had such wonderful stories told to me, sitting in a bus, sitting in a train, and in India, because we are so willing to share our stories, so happily free about the details of our lives, that we can actually, like, as a writer, you can get a story almost every other day just by being open to the conversation, to talking to the person next to you. Okay, and that could be in a roadside dhaba, it could be in a cafe, it could be in a bookshop, it could be on a bus, it could be on a long distance train. Long distance trains are the best because, like, you're in proximity and you're spending 30 hours together. You're going to get the full details of their life.
So, when I was reading The Education of Yuri, I loved how it ends because here's a fictional world. We know that there are some elements of the unnamed narrator from M and the Big Whom, perhaps some parts of you because of Mahim. But here was this fictional book with a real poet giving a job at the end of it. And when I was reading, I thought, my God, I live my life teaching literature. It's still possible. You make those intersections of life and literature happen. So tell us a little bit about these, how you look back at your life and tell these stories, but also these happy accidents, these beautiful intersections. Tell us a little bit about that.
One of the things is that I got lucky. I got born in Bombay and Mumbai, and it's a city of intense democracy. I remember a young man from Delhi telling me that nobody uses aap for me in Bombay. They say tu, and taxi drivers say tu, baith ja, they say. They don't say baithiye. And I remember thinking, yeah, because just see you as an equal. Like, he's a contractor. He's offering you a contract for mobility.
Right.
Okay, he's not your servant, right? So I think one of the things that the infection of democracy moved through the literary sphere as well.
Absolutely.
So Adil was available to us. Nissim Ezekiel was
Yes.
available to us. Eunice was available in a smaller way because she was a bit formidable and very savage, but she was still available. We had poets in Hindi, we had poets in Marathi, we had poets in Sindhi. Two of the greatest poets taught at Jai Hind College, Arjun Shad and Popti Hiranandani. Elphinstone College had Vasant Abhaji Dahake on its staff. So we've surrounded by this, like, we were a nest of singing birds, in that old phrase. All of them were there around us and we took it for granted. I remember there was a moment, I was walking on the street and I saw Geev Patel coming towards
Yes.
me
Oh, wow.
with another man. And I said, hi Geev, and he said, hi, and this is A.K. Ramanujan and we're going to see Nissim. And I said, oh, lovely. And I turned to A.K. and I said, loved speaking of Shiva, loved landscapes, interior landscape, loved whatever, lots of the books. And he said, what about the poems? I said, Striders, I love the Striders. And I said, now I have to run, and I ran. And I keep now think, like, what work could you have had that was more important than sitting with these guys? Because I could have said, can I join you? And 98% of the chances would have been they'd have said yes. Okay. And I could have been sitting there when Nissim Ezekiel, Geev Patel and A.K. Ramanujan were talking and I went off to do my own work. Okay. So stupid. Yeah. So these intersections were part of everyday life, right? When I was teaching mathematics, I'd be walking down the street and Nissim Ezekiel and I would be getting into the same bus. I'm both heading for the same last seat. And of course, I would yield it to him. And then we'd sit and chat. And, I mean, I'd be standing, he'd be sitting, and we'd be talking poetry on the bus in the middle of the city. It was just fabulous. It was like, I mean, looking back, it was fabulous. Then it was just quotidian, it was
Life.
ordinary. And so you'll ask, how was it that the idea that the writer was someone who was an elite person? I don't know how one held on to these two things simultaneously, except I think it is because we all suffer from imposter syndrome in certain ways. So you think, yeah, sure. I mean, he's saying, you're a writer. But he's being kind. He likes you. That's why he's saying it. It's not because you're really a writer. So I think we all need to recognize that we suffer from this imposter syndrome. And it's at the back. It's not that there is an elite that mans its doors. It is that you are refusing to see yourself because you're just worried about like how other people are seeing you. It's such a tormented and confused time when you're a young person, that you can't see that you're really having a great time actually, or at the same time. You're being tormented while you're having a great time. The torment is happening inside your head.
Yes.
Everywhere outside they're being perfectly civil to you. And, saying, come, sit, read your poem, tell me what you think. I'm reading a poem to you, tell me what you think. I remember reading Arvind Krishna Mehrotra's essay, where he talks about the first time he came to Bombay as an MA student. He was living in Ville Parle, and someone told him that there was a party at Pilu Pochkhanawala's house. Pilu Pochkhanawala, great sculptor of Bombay, died sadly young of cancer. And he went there, and it was a soiree, like, I mean, an evening of poetry. And there was Nissim Ezekiel reading out Adil Jasawala's poems, because Adil had sent him a copy of the book while he was still in England. And Nissim was actually reading out these poems to this gathering. And I'm thinking, what a triangle we have here. Adil's poems, Nissim's voice, Arvind Krishna Mehrotra's ears. And, created in this space. So, you do not ever see the magic during the magical times. You see the magic in retrospect. That's the problem.
Yes. And someday we are going to be very thrilled thinking about, we did one of our first events with Jerry Pinto here at Azim Premji. Our students are going to say, we went first year when we saw Jerry Pinto for the first time giving a talk. So lovely to hear you talk, Jerry. We're coming to the end of our conversation. And maybe tell us a little bit about the economics of being a writer. How do you make a living?
I have a question. When did you last buy a book? So, really speaking, writers are dependent upon readers. Readers in India tend to borrow books.
Yeah.
Readers in India tend to say books are so expensive.
Yes.
But of course they are expensive. There's paper cost, there's printing cost, there's transport cost, right? And there is paying the author a living cost.
Yes.
Naturally, paying the publisher, the editor, everybody a living cost.
Yes.
So it's going to be expensive. So you prefer to buy coffee, okay, in a barista. You sit there drinking 300 rupees worth of coffee, which will pass through your body and leave no trace, if you're lucky, out into the world the next day. You choose not to use that 300 rupees on books.
Yeah.
And as long as you choose to do that, the economics of book production in India will mean that very few people can actually live by the pen.
Exactly.
Most of the people who can live by writing are people who write scripts. And they have to write into a madly economic world. Because if I'm writing a novel, I can set my novel in 6 different countries. And it costs the publisher nothing. Because I'm just writing about them. But if I write a script that requires 6 different countries, the producer has to fork over the money for 6 different sets of air tickets and all the attendant costs, right? So therefore, the writer of scripts must be much more aware of the cost benefit analysis of what they are doing, and also has to write into a whole bunch of people. There's a producer, there's a director, there's an actor, there's everybody, and you're lucky if 15% of your novel ever gets up to onto the screen. So those are guys who have to write. They can write for a living, they can make enough money, but if you are a writer who likes to be alone and likes to be free to do your own thing at your own pace, and to have an unfettered imagination, to be operating on your own, then you're probably not going to be very happy working in a joint situation like being in a script. So most writers eventually, if they want to only be writers, probably end up writing for television, writing for OTT platforms, writing for films. Good luck to them. Can't do it myself. Got lucky. My needs are few and simple. I keep them very basic. I don't buy too many clothes. I don't take too many taxis. I don't eat out often. I don't drink, which is a big saving. And most of my money I spend on books and films, right? So I manage because I am very economical and very controlled with my budget. So I always say you can get a great life writing, but you can't get a lifestyle. If you want a lifestyle, you have to, if you want Riesling and duck à la orange for dinner, maybe not the job for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so honest. Your website actually describes you as a poet, even though you're known for verse. And I was just wondering if you'd like to read something
Sure.
for.
Yeah. Thank you. This is my book called I Want a Poem. And so I'm going to read you a poem called Today My Mother is in the Audience. Today my mother is in the audience, as she never was when she lived. Today she sits in the audience and I see her as a whole, as at her best, a mischievous twinkle in her eye, a twinkle that says, "Cha Baba, don't let these people see your pompous side." She loved the English language, my mother, who knew Burmese till her Goan cousins laughed her into amnesia and gave her the gift of Konkani and some Portuguese. In this audience, my mother smiles when a smile is called for. She loves it when you laugh or clap. It embarrasses me, that smile, her clear, uninflected enjoyment of any small success. I bear it bravely because she is somewhere in the audience. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you at Azim Premji. I think one of the greatest gifts of a life in literature or life in the humanities is you get an opportunity, 3 years, time to discover yourself, time to really understand who you are. And that is really important. So while you are struggling with with all the pressures of academics, while you are struggling to do those essays and pass those exams, take time off to find who you are. And all the best with that.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for giving us your time, for having this conversation with us, and for making literature a possible way of living, a way of life. Thank you so much.
My pleasure entirely.